and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Art Teacher Kay, and she is choosing to remain anonymous today because she still is working in the classroom as a teacher, and she really wants to be able to share the complete truth about her experiences, and she also wants to warn young women about some of the really difficult situations they can find themselves in the classroom. So, Art Teacher Kay, I'm curious, what are some of the most shocking things you started to experience once you got in the classroom that maybe you weren't totally anticipating?
I would say right off the bat, no one prepared me for how much you are navigating kids who do not have social skills. And some of that may come from COVID. But I tell people a lot, when people told me, oh, the kids are going to be tough, you're going to have to convince them to like art. I looked at that and I thought, that's a challenge I'm willing to take. I love that. But if you had told me like you're going to have a kid who doesn't understand social cues and needs you to mitigate almost every situation he's in, or else he's going to blow up, or you need to be able to navigate really complex bullying situations that there's very unclear answers on and there's a lot of pressure on you, I probably would have thought twice about being a teacher. Right off the bat, they do not tell you enough how complex a lot of these relationships are. And they just tell you to go in and build relationship, but they don't talk about how messy these relationships can be. So that was probably one of the big ones that stood out to me. The other one, I honestly did not believe how dysregulated and misbehaving kids are. The behaviors were so much more than I expected. And my school has done a good job of dealing with them. And I still feel very overwhelmed by the behaviors that I see and how little parents are involved in correcting them. So those are probably the big ones for me.
Definitely. And what kind of age level are you teaching? What grades are you teaching?
I teach 6th through 8th. So right at that most charming time of life where they're all just sunshine and rainbows.
That's funny. Yeah, middle school is really tough. So I'm kind of curious for somebody that's not a teacher or maybe they teach a different age range, what's kind of like a day in the life of an art teacher? What are some of the most common misbehaviors that you see every day?
So one time I had a student who was really frustrated. His grade was not where he wanted it to be. And I told him, I'm not going to change your grade. You need to actually turn in these projects. You haven't finished them. Go work on them for the next couple of days and turn them back in, and you'll get your points. And he was very frustrated. And so as I was around the room dealing with other students, I had my back to him just long enough that he took every Sharpie I had and he hot glued every single one shut. And Sharpies are expensive. They're a very pricey art material. So I had already spent my budget and they were a key part of some of our projects. So yeah, I actually had to eat that cost and go out and buy new Sharpies with my own money. So that's one example. I've had a fight every year that I've taught. It's sort of an annual tradition at this point, where students, usually they're on opposite sides of the room and they're working totally quiet, and then we get up, we clean up, and somewhere within the cleanup process, somebody steps on someone's toes. And at that point, I look over and someone's on the floor on top of one another. And they're always the most breakout fights. There's never really build up. It's usually some student has just snapped and it's happening in my class. So I've had fist fights. I've had students slap each other, throw water on each other, and walk out. Thankfully, I haven't had anyone actually throw a chair, but I've had students grab a chair, like they will throw, and just a lot of shoving on the floor. So those are some of the more normal behaviors. And then a lot of just kind of outbursts, a lot of cussing at me, threatening me. I've had parents come in, threaten to get me fired because their kid is not passing, and call you all sorts of names. A lot about how incompetent you are and how unintelligent you are. Those are a lot of the big things that I see.
Wow, that is crazy. And have you ever felt, in addition to what you just shared, under attack or unsafe or like you didn't have any support in those situations?
Yeah, I would say that our district does better, or not really our district, but our building in particular has taken a stand against it. In our state, you are penalized for disciplining too high of a proportion of students of color. And we live in a very high population of students who are not just white. And so every year our school is heavily disciplined and kind of taken on by our state because we actually will discipline misbehavior and violence. And so we just eat the penalizations. Our principals will go to these meetings that they have to attend where they're reprimanded for it. But they're very strong in the stance that we just cannot let this happen because our school would be pandemonium if we didn't. So because of that, if I were to send a student down to them, the chances that that student comes back are very unlikely. That being said, I have had one student who was physically threatening in a way that wasn't as outright. He would kind of loom over me and, kind of make bodily gestures at me like he wanted to charge me. And because there wasn't really an outright threat, it was more of a perceived threat. I couldn't send him down, and there wasn't really a way to deal with it other than to make note that I felt unsafe. And that was one time where I wasn't supported. They just told me he has to do something before we can step in. But yeah, there very rarely have I felt that way, but it has happened once where I felt very unsafe. But usually they're pretty decent about trying to stand up for us.
Wow, that's really intense. It's actually incredibly rare to have a school go against mandates and go against the state. So that is really awesome that they have your back like that. And I know when you reached out, you kind of mentioned that you feel in many situations a lot of women are leaving the profession because they're unsafe or unsupported. Could you tell us more about that and how you're writing your thesis on that?
Yeah, this has become kind of my passion subject right now. Kind of looking into it, there isn't a lot of research directed at women in education, looking at specifically them and why they're leaving. But when you kind of start looking at all the data and you look at kind of women's preferences in the workplace and their priorities and concerns, you can see how teaching is really becoming something against that. It started as an ideal field for women in a lot of ways. It should technically fit well, but it's really not. And a lot of it has to do with risk factor and time factor. So, if you take the job so you can spend more time with your kids, on average, you're spending 60 to 80 hours in the classroom just trying to teach and prep and do all the administration work you're getting. So you're spending probably less time with your kids than you would be if you were working a regular 9 to 5. Or in other situations, you're in physical danger. My school is very unique in protecting me and trying to protect other students. Most schools are being held back and not allowed to appropriately address physical violence. And so there's schools in my state where teachers have been threatened. They've been sent death threats. And that student who sent them have not been removed from that school. And so you can imagine being a young mother or being a young woman who wants to have kids someday. Why would you stay there when you need to be a mother for your kid first? You need to be a wife to your husband. You just need to be an independent woman who's not threatened and at risk. And so when you have students able to make these threats and still be around you, you're probably just going to cut your losses and find something safer. So a lot of what we're seeing in the data is that women feel like this job that was supposed to be a good fit, once they have young children or once they start making decisions towards family life, even up to a year beforehand, they start to look for less risky jobs, something that feels safer, something that allows a better family balance. And so that really puts young women in a tight spot. I mean, I'm looking at possibly starting a family soon with my husband, and we're really evaluating, is teaching hospitable to being a mother?
That's so true. Yeah. And it's interesting because I even had a guest recently that was a guy, and he said he wanted to become a teacher to spend more time with his kids and to have a better pace of life. And he was just shocked at the absolute overwhelm and just all the paperwork and all of the insane data meetings. So that is a really good point. I think a lot of non teachers see teaching as a way to have summers off and tons of holidays and really great work hours, but they just have no idea what teachers are actually dealing with in terms of not only time, but stress. And like you said, in some situations, physical threats. So I'm curious, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you tried to complain to admin and they retaliated against you?
Yeah. So there hasn't been a whole lot of personally just against me. I've had a couple situations where I've gone to my administration and asked for help, and they've kind of just said, well, you need to be a team player, you need to figure it out. And they haven't been helpful. On a district-wide level, though, last year, my school, my whole district, we actually got to the point where we submitted our intention to strike, and we fully intended to go forward with it for pay. We had been taking 0% and 0.1% raises for quite a few years at that point. And we were, I want to say the number was about 12% behind already. And then with all the inflation that hit, we were absolutely devastated. Our healthcare had gone up. The packages were no longer affordable. I, as a single person, could not afford the single healthcare package that they offered us. And so if you're a teacher and your salary can't even cover your, life expenses and your life insurance, or all of your insurances, obviously you can't stay there, or they need to do a raise. And so we went to them and asked for a raise, and we were stonewalled. It was to the point where they would not even answer emails or calls when we asked to negotiate. So it got quite extreme. And we eventually got to the point where we submitted our intent to strike. It was, I believe, 97% for striking or something like that. We had a restraining order out against the district because they were, going after us so much. And we told them, hey, we're going to strike. And suddenly, magically, the money we needed appeared. And we were all very celebratory, but we kind of waited because we knew our district is very petty. It's hard to say that about a whole district, but they definitely got us back. They recommended to our board that we cut teachers in response for the raise. And they kind of strong-armed our school board into cutting teachers to make up for the raise. So we got what we wanted, but they still kind of came after us, and we lost quite a few teachers who we really needed and had to be rehired back on later anyway. So
wow, that's so interesting. And you mentioned in your email a lack of funding for the arts. Can you tell us more about that?
So we get a lot of funding for our athletics, and the same is not really reciprocated for our arts, which is really disappointing because arts are in a really tough situation. We use tons of consumables. I will probably go through a good 100 pounds of clay in a year. We're using, hundreds of sheets of paper. We're using up all this paint, and not a lot of it lasts until next year, especially with things like paint or markers. They can dry up, they can expire. And so our classes are consuming a ton of materials, and a lot of times our budget is cut year by year. So as materials are going up in cost, the amount of kids in the room is increasing. The amount of behaviors where they damage materials is increasing. We're not seeing an increase in budget. We're actually being asked to work with less. And so, like in my district, we don't really afford canvases. We can't afford canvases. So we paint on cardboard. And that's how we give students a nicer project. It's really unfortunate. And I do appreciate that my building, if they have extra funds, they will often contact me and ask me what they can get for me. But the fact that it's not outright funded, and you, for most of the year, are penny pitching, putting a lot of your own money in, and having to be really hard on students about what they can and can't make. It's really disappointing, and the students feel kind of cheated by it as well.
Definitely. And I forgot to ask you earlier, you said that your school is more kind of forward facing and focusing on getting discipline. Do you guys have like a certain program like PBIS, or how does school discipline work for you?
Oh, I'm so thankful to say we do not do PBIS. I'm not sure if I haven't heard of the system other places, so I think it might be kind of a hybrid thing that our school invented, but I don't want them to take credit for it if they didn't. It's like a step program. We document what happens, and we put students on steps. So like a step 1 would be a warning. A step 2 might be a visit to the office. A step 3 might be, something even further. And we kind of follow that system. And usually by the end, you are in school suspension. And we are planning meetings to meet with parents to talk about what's going on and how behavior can be decreased. And I honestly am so thankful for it in some ways, because the idea of a student coming back into my room with a lollipop would probably devastate me. But at the same time, it is a lot of paperwork, and there's very rarely time to do that paperwork and to follow up with these procedures. You really don't have time to just sit down and be like, okay, little Timmy, we're going to go, you're on like a step 6. So let's write up your procedure here and send you to here and make sure this happens. So it's a good system compared to a lot of them, but it definitely is hard to get the ball rolling and keep up with it and make sure that students are following in those steps.
That makes sense. And I'm also curious about your grading system because a lot of teachers have complained about like standards based grading or not being able to fail students and feeling like they need to pass kids. Have you experienced that all, or what has that been like for you?
Yeah. It sounds so harsh to say that, no child left behind, this idea of like we need to leave children behind. That's sort of almost the jokey way to talk about how hard that's been. It's hard enough in art because a lot of parents are telling their kids art does not matter. I don't care if you pass it. And there is an attitude throughout the school that your core classes are more important. So if you need to throw one class under the bus, it should be art. I have a lot of students who are pulled from my class continually because they're not succeeding in their core classes, even when they're failing my class, and they should be in mine working on that. So because of that, it's a little bit frustrating that kids just get passed on. It doesn't really matter what score I give them. They just end up going right through the system. And right now our school is actually in transition. We are moving into standards-based grading. So it's coming for us. And I teach kind of a hybrid version of it right now, where students still are able to fail my class, but they do get unlimited opportunities to make up their work. And they're based on standards already within my classroom. I transitioned them over a little bit earlier. And for me, this hybrid system has worked because I've been able to nitpick it to what I want and what fits me as a teacher. If I were full standards-based, I would probably lose my mind. But right now I get to say, no, you're at a 0. This does not go in the grade book as a 50. It goes in as a 0.
Wow. And I'm kind of curious, what have parents been like for you? Have you found them to be supportive, or what has that been like for you?
Yeah, I kind of get a mixture. This year I have dubbed the year of horrible parents, though. I had really supportive parents the last 2 years. They were mostly nice. If anyone didn't like me, I never knew. However, this year, during our first set of conferences, I had a parent come in, and her child is frequently absent. Was not showing up. When they did show up, they were working very slow, falling behind. They weren't able to keep up. And this parent was not happy at all. They made threats. They threatened to get me fired. They threatened to go complain to the superintendent. They called me incompetent, said I was uneducated and didn't belong there, all sorts of different things. Very angry, very aggressive parent. And it was one of those situations where even when you try to diffuse it, I think I said something like, I understand you're upset, but I can't change a participation grade if she's not there to participate. And, this parent yelled at me for saying that they were upset. So very extreme behavior. And that sort of has been the tone this year. I've been hung up on. I've been called, like uneducated. I've been told I don't matter. All these different things from parents this year. And this is the first year it's been that bad, but it's really, it's probably been the main reason why I'm so unhappy with teaching right now. It's just the way that I'm treated by parents.
And have you found going to admin has been helpful with that, or are they kind of hands off in that regard?
We have one admin who's really good. She is like a no-nonsense woman. The kids are terrified of her because she will take nothing from them. And when she found out about it, she was very nice. She came up and, checked on me and just kind of told me like, yeah, people like that are crazy. They shouldn't treat you that way. You're good for standing up for yourself. Wonderful experience with her, but she was not the norm. I had to reach out and go through the documentation process with this sort of behavior. And in that, I was very much dismissed by other members of staff. And it was really disappointing because it was so traumatic for me. And I was, shaken up and, terrified to go back into school just because she had broken my confidence as an educator. And so to have, these people who are supposed to be your leaders just kind of be like, yeah, sorry that happened. I don't know what you want us to do. You're sort of like, encourage me, comfort me. Tell me how I'll be safe if she comes back in and makes threats again. Anything.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's been a really mixed bag. So if somebody was coming to you and telling you that they are thinking about becoming a teacher, what would you tell them? Would you encourage them to do it? Would you tell them to run for the hills? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would probably say don't do it, because the best way I can describe my district, or specifically my school, I want to emphasize my district has not always been nice, especially during the strike. They were pretty shifty. But even with my building, they are what I would say is good. They do quite a bit to help us, and I'm so much better off than other teachers that I hear about, and it's still not enough. I'm still exhausted. I'm decimated. I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I don't get enough support, and I don't know what would change that. And I think that's sort of the killer part of teaching, is that it's coming from so many areas. It really is death by a thousand paper cuts. They can be really on top of their student discipline. At the same time, you're staying late every day. You're worn out with all the paperwork. You're overwhelmed by all these all these like PLCs and consultations and things they expect of you. Or maybe they're really good at giving you your time, but they're so uninvolved that they're not supporting you, and they're not there to defend you, and maybe not dealing with student behaviors. So it seems like there's like a rare few gems of schools that are doing well, and those who are even doing good, like my school, they're just not cutting it, and they still leave you decimated and overwhelmed and defeated.
Yeah, I think you put that really well. And I'm kind of curious, in spite of the student misbehavior, have you found any part of working with students to be joyful and motivating, or do you find that that's as big of a problem as some of the overwork?
Oh, I love my students. I think of them, and I can rarely think of a student who I do not want to be in a room with. Sometimes, you think of them, that one student in a room with 30 other students, and you cringe a little. But you think, if I just got to spend time with them, oh, we'd have fun, we'd chat, we'd enjoy each other's company. It'd be fun to teach them. I really love art. I love the process of seeing students learn. They're not bad artists. They just haven't practiced. Their faces when they make their first piece of clay on the wheel is amazing. I love that part of the job. And there's very few situations where I've ever been miserable when I'm, building a relationship with a student. It's really the joy that keeps me going. When I think about, I just need to be done, I can't take this anymore, the first thing I feel is just that pang in my heart when I think, but those students, they're talking about how excited they are for classes next year, and which of my electives they're going to take, and all these things. And even this morning, I just wanted to cry at a student who said, I wish I could take your class all year, but I'm going to take every elective you have next year. And I just had to sit and think, I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. And it feels like a betrayal to them to just leave them like this. So I love them, and they're wonderful.
That's really sweet. And I know I complain a lot on this channel, but that's exactly what I was struggling with when I was thinking about leaving back in 2021. The students were actually like one of the hardest aspects of leaving. And it was so weird when I finally kind of let them know at the last minute. They were really upset and really sad. And I do think it's such a difficult thing for teachers, because on the one hand, there can be these magical teaching moments, and it's not all bad, but sometimes the parts that are bad are so overwhelming. Like you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's just not quite enough. So I think a lot of people could definitely relate to you with that. So I'm curious, as you've gone through kind of these highs and lows, have you ever reached out to either your teaching peers or administrators and experienced gaslighting, or what has that been like for you?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of gaslighting in the teacher's profession. There's the funny stuff where you're in the classroom and the kids are hitting each other, and you tell them to stop, and they're like, I'm not doing that. I'm not hitting anybody. And that's the funny stuff, but it's it's like the first gaslighting you get. And then usually when you talk to your teacher peers, they're pretty honest with you. Most of my peers that I went through my teaching program with, I'm still in contact with, and a lot of them have left teaching already. And they're very open, like, that was miserable, that was awful, here were all the things I hated and why I hated them. I would say the biggest gaslighters that I run into is really the administration. The amount of times that I have found that that kind of like we teach because we love type memes stuck up in the teacher lounge, and you just want to walk in and rip it off the wall because you're like, we are not feeling that good. We're not into this like weird cutesy like thing. We're tired and we're mad and we want to go home and we don't want to read this. And so there's kind of a lot of that with administrators. I find it really tough how contradictory they are. I don't know if this technically counts as gaslighting, but it makes me feel really crazy. The amount of times where I get lectured about not lecturing my students, or they'll tell us, you know, we hold you to this standard, but your students don't have to be held to like higher standards, or you need to diversify your lessons and make them unique to each student. And then you meet with your other teacher friends after an evaluation and they said the same thing to every teacher, like they almost didn't come and observe your class. There's a lot of, I would say, making you feel crazy as a teacher. Whether it's no, the behaviors aren't what you think, you just need to be a better teacher, or it's just them saying one thing and doing another, maybe verbally supporting you and then consistently undermining you with what policies they put in place or with what they kind of enforce with the students. And it's really exhausting because, I mean, you really do feel like you just lost it. You go home and you're like, I think I'm just going crazy. It must be me. But if you talk to your other teachers, a lot of the times they'll tell you the same thing. So
Definitely. And I'm kind of curious, just in general, where do you think modern teaching is missing the mark, whether it's like educational psychology or professional development? What do you think has really gone wrong in education so far?
it's kind of hard for me to say exactly because I feel like there's so many little facets that make a difference. I would say number one is using curriculum that earns someone money, because usually they have a reason they want you to use that curriculum. And very rarely are any of those studies that they published totally honest. There's got to be so much money behind the scenes because half of the things they give you to implement in your classroom are just nonsense. And so there's so much of this, like, let's use whatever curriculum is fashionable. Let's hop from this trend to this trend to this trend. And before we've even seen 10 years of progress and whether this current thing we were on has any effect, we're moving to the next thing. And what I see is, you know, we're jumping curriculum, we're jumping procedure, we're bouncing all over the place. There's no consistency. And then the teachers with their professional development suffer a lot. Ironically, as an art teacher, most of the stuff that we do in professional development has never applied to me and probably never will. And so here I am learning all these new procedures over and over and over again. Within the few years I've been at one building, I've probably had 3 different types of grading, or 3 different procedures for what to do for certain, you know, aspects of my curriculum changed. And every professional development, rather than learning things that are valuable, I'm relearning how they want me to do these procedures. And so it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my chance to grow as a teacher and learn more. And it really just gets in the way and gums up the wheels. It's really exhausting that we don't have time to see our effects play out. And then the other thing I think is that we are so data driven that we've just lost our humanity as an organization. The moment the data doesn't work, we're on to the next thing. We're changing everything. And we're so obsessed with teachers getting data that we never stop and think when it's relevant. I'm an art teacher. How am I supposed to quantify something like understanding shape and form unless I give them the most empty, like meaningless worksheet possible? And yet they're still on my back about, we need data, we need numbers, we need to know the math, the reading, things like that. And so this idea of these trends, this data that they want us to collect, and the way they just kind of waste our time with all these new shiny things they're running after, I think prevent us from really unifying and kind of battling against the areas where we're dealing with student behaviors and parents. We're so distracted just trying to survive and stay afloat with what they give us. How are we supposed to look at the current situation the students are living in and address that appropriately.
Definitely. And so I like to ask people this question. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything in education, what would you change?
I have kind of maybe not the nicest answer, because if it happened in real life, it would probably be really unfortunate. But I think in a lot of ways, the magic version, I would just say make everyone appreciate education and feel like it's a privilege again. The real kind of how we would go about making that happen would probably not be great, because it would mean a lot of people would lose out on something that they really need that they don't realize. But in a magic world, if we could just make everyone appreciate something without losing it, I think we need to see education as a privilege and an opportunity to go somewhere again. Right now, it's just something that everyone gets, and you're just entitled to it, and you just get it. It's not something that you have to work for. And I think that affects the way we treat educators, and it affects the way kids view school. And so it's kind of it's a far off dream that we would ever get back to seeing it for the amazing thing it is. But I really think if we started to see it as such a gift again, it would affect the way we treat it with our policies and the way we bring up our kids and how they interact with teachers. Right now, like, I could give my middle schoolers an hour to go run outside and they'd still complain. And they'd still kind of huff and roll their eyes because it doesn't have any value to them. And so part of motivating comes from thinking this is important to me and I need it. And our kids just, they don't hear that enough, how important it is. And maybe they're hearing it, but they don't see or understand why it's important.
Absolutely. And I'm also curious, I'm not sure if you've thought about this or not, but if you were able to talk to your district, because it sounds like there's much more problems at the district level than your building, if you could tell them to change something or give them advice, what would you tell your school district?
This one's touchy because there is a figurehead of all the shenanigans. There is a person who is very well known to be the like leader in everything. And so that person needs to go, which sounds terrible. I hate to just tell people to fire someone. But unfortunately, there's one person who has way more control and authority than they need, and they can be very vindictive, and their ego has led them to hurt and burn a lot of bridges of very important people who have been helping our district. It's led them to drive a lot of people out, and it's really just kind of made it an uncomfortable environment. From the top down now, it is just infected because you don't know who to trust, who has allegiance with this person, who is, the secret rebellion against them. Can you talk to your principal and say, hey, this high up district person, I feel targeted, or are they going to go to that person and the next thing your life is miserable? This person has, even some of my friends, they've targeted them trying to get their jobs down to things like working in 0.85 so that they don't get the benefits that they need because they spoke out against something that person did. And so where it sounds kind of crazy, but we're sort of like dealing with a secret overlord and all these like political underworkings here where it just gets messy. And so I hate to blame it on one person, but I think if our district reordered some of the authority and really put in some checks and balances, we would not be where we are. This person gave themselves a raise and gave the administration around them a raise that was equivalent to what us teachers were asking for, if I'm remembering correctly. Massive increases in raise as they were looking at us teachers who couldn't afford to make ends meet and saying, we don't have anything for you. So we really need some change there.
Thanks for sharing that. Well, this has been super helpful, Kay. I'm just curious. I know a lot of people are probably in a similar position as you. They're newish to teaching and they're seeing some of the good things and some of the bad things, potential corruption, but sometimes the students are really great and sometimes it's a mixed bag with admin. So I'm just curious, for you personally, do you think it's worth it to be a teacher?
I would say from a financial standpoint, probably not. You're going to invest a lot of money into getting that education, and then you're probably going to get paid pennies. And so in that sense, probably not as a financial investment, as like a an emotional and maybe a spiritual growth thing. I would say that I've had to rely on my faith and spend more time in prayer and in my Bible than I have before because I've needed it. I kind of have been, on the cusp of a mental breakdown for who knows how long. And the one thing that keeps me going in the morning is going in and just praying and saying, God, I can't do this. This is going to have to be you today because I can't make it. And so things like that, it'll grow you a lot. I mean, you learn how to lose your ego really fast. Hopefully, you learn how to deal with people who you really don't get along with in ways you would never imagine. I mean, you're going to grow a lot of skills and a lot of character growth if you let it. And for some people, maybe it's worth it, especially if you find a school that can actually provide the support you need. I would say the growth that I've had has been worth it in the long run. And I'll probably look back on my teaching years and be so thankful for them. But I think long term, the mental health toll it takes on you, if you, like me, maybe overestimate where you are mentally and what you can handle, it might be better to look for other ways to grow your character and test your faith and maybe stay out of the classroom.
I can definitely relate to everything that you said 100%. Eventually, I reached the point where I was like, in terms of just like mental health and stress and everything, it was finally too much. But I think if I hadn't have reached that point, there's a possibility that I would still be teaching. So I can definitely understand what a tug of war that is internally. And so I just appreciate you so much, Kay. I think you're going to be awesome no matter what field you go into. And audience, thank you so much for watching. If you ever want to interview with me, you can email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.